Hello, my name is Stephen Mayeux, and this is my video series on practical JavaScript, where I walk you through the algorithm challenges at freecodecamp.com. I'm actually at a meetup with Free Code Camp Busan right here in the Busan lab. You can probably see them over there. Say what's up, guys.
What's up, guys?
Anyway, going to do some challenges right real quick over here, so let's jump into it. For this challenge, we're going to do the friendly date ranges. And basically, we're taking a string, two strings actually, in this format, year, month, and date, and we're going to make that into kind of a human-readable array of strings. Now, ordinarily, I wouldn't build something like this for myself because there's no reason to do that. There's a lot of, great, libraries to do this. One of my favorite is called moment.js. It's simply incredible. It's got awesome documentation. You can format dates, calendar times. It has support for multiple time zones. It's just really cool. And in the real world, I wouldn't build my own functions for making friendly date ranges. That said, I think this challenge is useful because you're going to learn a lot about the date object in JavaScript. So enough of that. Let's jump right into it. I've already typed out this code in my Atom editor. Whoops. And just to save time, I'm going to be copying and pasting instead of typing it all out. As you can see, my final solution is over 60 lines, and I want to limit the video to 15 minutes. So instead of typing along like I normally do, I'm just going to copy and paste from my solution. But kind of one thing I want to show you right off the bat. Oh yeah, before we start this challenge, please pause the video. Read through the instructions. It's quite meaty, and you definitely want to look at all of the examples right here. I want to show you something pretty cool. So we have our array of two dates, and I want to show you something. Okay, it is this line right here. Okay, date.parse. So what do I get if I write date.parse? Okay, and I'm going to pass it in the first element. Okay. If I do that, I get this long, like really, really big number. And this number actually right here, these are milliseconds. And this is the number of milliseconds from January 1st, 1970. For some reason, in a lot of programming languages and just computer science in general, time really started at 12 a.m. midnight, January 1st in 1970. Don't ask me why, but that's become the standard. And when we measure time and dates, we normally measure it in milliseconds from January 1st, 1970. So the parse method, it's a method of the date object, and we pass it in a string, and then it gives us the number of milliseconds from January 1st, 1970. So with that in mind, we can take those milliseconds and we can create like an actual date object with it. So I'm going to go ahead and copy a bunch of this stuff right here, and then I'll tell you what it does. Okay. So I've got four variables that I'm going to use. Start, okay, it's the first index of this array, and then this is the end date. So I'm creating the number of milliseconds, and then I'm passing it, I'm instantiating a new date object with those milliseconds. So now I have access to all of these cool date and time methods that we're going to need later on. For a lot of the conditional statements, we need to determine whether or not the end date is within a year or more than a year from the start date. And so this is exactly 1 year in milliseconds. So don't even ask me to it's like 3 billion something. Anyway, it's a big ass number. That's the year in milliseconds. And according to the instructions, if we are passing in a starting date in the current year, which is 2016 at the time of the recording of this video, then we don't have to actually print the current year. So that's where I'm getting the the current year from. So I instantiate a new date object, and then I call the getFullYear method. And so it will return 2016. I can go ahead and show you what that looks like. Return current year. Okay, I get 2016. I can show you the start variable, show you what that looks like. Okay, and I get like this string with like this timestamp over here. So that's what's going on. All right, and this method, or this challenge, it requires a lot of helper functions. So remember, if you go back to the very first video that I've done months ago, a function is really just a reusable block of code. So with that in mind, we got to consider that it would be kind of pointless and not very dry. Don't repeat yourself. It wouldn't be very dry to repeat the same code and copy and paste over and over again. So I'm going to create a lot of reusable blocks in what we call helper methods. And helper methods are just other functions that we create. Kind of like a parent or godlike function. Can just use it repeatedly over and over again. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste some of my helper functions from my Atom editor. Okay. And you can paste these functions, these helpers. You can do it inside of the main function, make friendly dates, or you can paste it outside. And because of scope, it doesn't really matter. You can do it inside or outside. These functions will be in scope to the main function, make friendly dates. So I've got an array of months, so just the human readable months, fully spelled out, January through December. I've got this function right here that takes a integer and then it converts it into a ordinal number. So if it's 1, 21, or 31, we add st. If it's 2 or 22, we add nd. 3 or 23, rd. And any other numbers, we add th to it. And then these two helper methods right here, basically it uses, it accesses the months values from this array, and then it creates the ordinal number, and then the full date with the month, day, and year. It uses month and day, this helper function, and it also gets the full year. So even one of my helper functions uses a helper function, and you could totally do that. Just consider a JavaScript function just like any other variable. You can pass it to this and that and this way and that way. It doesn't really matter. Okay, the JavaScript functions are first class. That means they're very fancy functions. Okay, so I got a lot of my helper functions right there in the text editor. One thing to note here, okay, this date method getMonth, okay, it's going to return the numerical value of the month, but it starts at 0. So yeah, when we write down time, January is represented by 1 because it's the first month of the year. But in JavaScript and a lot of programming languages, it is 0. January is 0, and then December would be month 11. So that's why it's a good idea to store your months in an array, because January is index 0 in my array. So I can access the values of my months array by using the getMonth method, and it just makes sense because the months are listed with a 0-based kind of index system. All right, so we got that out of the way. And basically, for the rest of this challenge, we just have to create different if statements. And it's a good idea to look at the examples and to read the instructions so you know exactly what you have to test for. And you'll notice that, that we're going to return one of 3 things in our array. In some cases, we'll return only the ordinal number. In other cases, we'll return just the month and the ordinal number. And in the third case, we'll return a full date. So the month, ordinal number, and and the year. Keep in mind, I don't know where you're from, but for these tests you have to use the American date convention. I know friends from the UK, you do the date first and then the month and then the year. My friends in Korea, you do the year first and then the month and the date. For this test, you got to use the American system. Not my decision, Free Code Campus based in San Francisco, so take it up with them. Okay, how much time do I have left? All right, I got 5 minutes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and paste in my if statements. I got 5 in total. Just one by one. All right, so first thing we need to test for if the start and end date are the same. So I'm going to subtract start from end, and I'm essentially subtracting the milliseconds. So if I subtract the start milliseconds from the end milliseconds and it equals 0, then I know those are the same dates. So if I subtract a million milliseconds from another million milliseconds, that equals 0, so it's the same date. In which case, I just return the date. Okay, so an array and a string, and you can see I call my full date helper method, and I pass it in an argument of my start date object, and you can see right here that full date calls the month and day helper method, concatenates a comma, and it adds on the get full year. So I get a full date right there. If I run it, it passed one of the tests, of course. Okay, let's go ahead and do the next condition. Okay. So the next condition, all right. What if we're in the current year and the start and end dates are within the same month? Well, in that case, we only have to return the month and the ordinal for the start, and then just the ordinal for the end date. So that's what I'm doing right here. And instead of copying this long, nasty kind of string concatenation, that's why I put it in a helper function. So when you read it right here, it's like clean, and you can kind of like, it's just sort of intuitive. You can kind of guess like what's going on with the code. So not only does helper functions, dry up your code so you don't repeat yourself as much, it makes it a lot more human readable, and that's what's going on right here. So first we test for whether or not the start and end date are the same, and then we test whether or not the start date is in the current year and if the end date is in the same month as the start date. Okay, I'm going to move it along, and I'll just go ahead. There's only 3 more conditions. I'll just go ahead and paste all of them in right now. Okay, and then I have conditions. Okay, what if the starting date is in the current year, but the end date, it's in a different month or even in the next year, but the 2 dates, they're less than 365 days apart? Well, this condition takes care of that, and you can see that I'm returning both the month and day for the start and end date. All right, now the next condition I'm going to test, if we're not in the current year, so if it's 2015 or 2017 or whatever, but it's also less than a year apart, well, this is what I'm going to do. And then finally, what will I do if the start and end dates are more than 365 days apart, regardless of whether or not the start date is in the current year? Well, that's what I'm doing right here, and I'm calling the full date methods for each of those. So if I run Control-Enter on this bad boy, you see I get the success message and all of the tests pass. So this one, it's not so much like technically difficult. You were certainly exposed to some new methods in the date object in JavaScript, but this just used some good old-fashioned problem solving, and relatively straightforward, but I remember the first time attempting this, getting the order of my if statements was a little bit tricky. So if you're kind of curious and you want to break something, go ahead and rearrange these if statements and see whether or not it passes all those tests. I bet it won't in all cases. Play around with the date object too. And I mean, more importantly, just go to the MDN developer website, and you can get all of the documentation for the the date methods and stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. All right, that's the end of this video. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for improvement, please let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.